Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Airspeed's Avatar Rewatch video. This one's going to be for Book 3 Fire Episode 2, The Headband. This one's animated by JM Animation. And yeah, really fun episode. One of a kind of personal favourite of mine. I'm aware like it's one of those more personal ones, like if you rank it quite highly within your kind of series ranking list. I think for most people it probably is just a kind of middle of the road episode, but for me it's kind of one of those ones where I put a little bit more importance on it and kind of place it a little higher than I think a lot of people do, because I think it's such a fun episode. I just had a kind of grin on my face the entire time watching this episode, which, you know, I enjoy all episodes of Avatar, but like there's only a few episodes where it's just like this really just fun ride the entire time through the episode. And obviously it's one of the more humorous, funny episodes that has some great moments throughout, and you know, with the dynamic of obviously Aang in school, so you get some kind of school kind of drama stuff, a little bit of shipping stuff thrown in as well. That's quite important. And you know, the more important, I suppose, core to the episode of like, this is why the people of the Fire Nation think that the war is, you know, kind of justified to a degree, and I suppose explaining why there's no real like rebel faction within the Fire Nation like opposing the military, why you don't really see many people deserting the military and so on. You know, that sort of kind of thing of like, they have their history book set up where like they've written the history that, even though it's not factually accurate, they won basically in a way, so they can write the history. And they've basically said that no, the air nomads had a military, and there's probably a similar explanation for why they're attacking the water tribes and the Earth Kingdom, just to make it seem like the Fire Nation are doing what they're doing with this war is good, and it's the other nations who are at fault. And because of that, the kids grow up thinking that the war is justified and that their nation is the best, without really knowing the facts of the situation. I thought it was this great moment where Aang kind of stood up and just said to the teacher, "Is that a trick question? You know, the air nomads didn't have a formal military," and everyone's just like, "Huh?" And obviously he had to kind of back down, because the question was just like, wait, how do you know what the history book said? This is from 100 years ago. But the 100-year point is interesting, because that's the reason it's so entrenched, that it has been more or less 100 years since the history books have been written that way. And so the generations of people that are alive right now, they are just, all they know is what the history books have to say, more or less. It's just some of the stuff in the catacombs, I suppose, more or less, is the only records of basically the truth and so on. But that's, you know, the core of that first section. But I'll actually start in terms of detailed analysis with Zuko's part of the episode. It's the smaller side of the episode, but it's still important. And the basic gist of this is that Zuko is kind of struggling to sleep. You can see that he's really, it's not going how he thought it would, returning to his nation and, you know, being accepted by his father. Obviously the whole Azula thing and her manipulating him, it's all the pressures on him that he has the legend of being the one who took out the Avatar. He's the one who knows that Aang is actually still alive, probably. He can't deal with the fact that he's kind of there under kind of a lie, basically. And the second that lie comes out, he's going to be more or less thrown out again, I suppose is his perspective. He just can't be comfortable in this situation, especially because he's in this situation because of mistakes he made, because of a decision he made to side with Azula against Iroh. And the fact that he starts to go and visit Iroh gradually, of course, walks to the prison, backs away, and then ends up actually going in and talking to Iroh like multiple times. And even though Iroh doesn't say anything to him, just the fact that Zuko keeps going there and realizes the mistake he made, it's a really kind of, I think it's an effective use of Iroh, because obviously it's partly down to the fact of the death of Mako, Iroh's voice actor, why they kind of did this. But I also think it kind of just naturally works as well, because Iroh tried to kind of really have, like, really tried to influence Zuko towards the end of book 2, of just saying, like, it's time for you to choose good. This is my, like, ultimate piece of advice to you. I think you will be better off if you chose good and to side with Aang, the Avatar, against the Fire Nation. Zuko went against that, and now he wants Iroh's help again, and it's almost as if he didn't hear what Iroh said before. He can't remember that Iroh told him to do that initially, which I think is just fascinating in that, like, he's asking Iroh basically for help out of this situation he's just got himself into. That he's basically asking Iroh to tell him how to deal with this loose end of, like, Aang still being alive, and of course Iroh wouldn't want to help him with that, because Iroh knows if he helps him with that stuff, that's Zuko going down the wrong path, the path he isn't meant to follow. And so he just stays silent until Zuko eventually realizes the right path that he needs to follow, begins to take the road that he needs to take in terms of what Iroh can clearly see is his kind of potential, his destiny. And I think in that way, when they decide to finally have Iroh kind of speak up in episode 6, it is such a strong moment because of, I suppose, Zuko's struggles up to now, because obviously he gets quite emotional at Iroh, where he kind of screams at him and says, you'd be in a gutter if it wasn't for, if you could have been here with me, living like a member of the royal family, but now if you weren't in prison, you'd probably be in a gutter. Basically, that's what he's saying. That's the kind of way he's seeing it. Zuko trying to obviously justify his choice to side against the one person who's believed in him all the way, and obviously one of Zuko's mistakes here is that getting nothing from Iroh, he leaves and tries to basically get rid of that last loose end, and that is hire a bounty hunter to properly take out Aang, knowing that Aang is probably still alive out there. And it's a telling moment where we cut back to Iroh, and just you can see the tear in his eye, that it hurts him to not talk to his nephew who's so important to him. It hurts him to see Zuko on this wrong path, away from, I suppose, the path he had almost gone down basically in book 2, but kind of strayed off it right at the end, and he's just kind of wondering when will he get back on track. So I like the dynamic. It's obviously stuff in the upcoming episodes, it kind of plays out a bit better, but it's still interesting, because the other part of this episode obviously is you see more of Mai and Zuko's relationship once again. Mai being one of the key reasons for why Zuko has any kind of happiness in the situation that he's in. Their relationship just seems to be going from strength to strength. It's obviously a very kind of unique dynamic between those two, but it works for them, of course. The idea of instead of both of them saying I love you to each other, it's I don't hate you, I also don't hate you, and that's what why they kiss. I just kind of like that, and that they are different characters. It's still the kind of somewhat lovey-dovey relationship, but less focused on the flowers and so on type thing. But very cool to see that dynamic, especially if you have the context of their reunion from the Lost Adventures comic, Going Home Again. Definitely helps to add context to it. Almost wish they would included in the show a little flashback to that scene, of the fact that they'd met before the scene on the boat in episode 1. But it's fine. They give you, I think, just enough context, because we know that Mai likes Zuko from Zuko alone. Azula does come in and basically reveals that she knows that Zuko went to see Iroh, and again putting more pressure on him to actually act against the lie, basically, that she more or less knows is the case, that Aang isn't dead. But just the subtle manipulations of Azula going on, knowing that Zuko is not in a very kind of stable position right now, and it's a really strong plot, because it's Zuko should have what he wants, but it's not going right for him, and I really do like that. The other side of the episode, of course, the Aang side, lots of fun stuff here. Wang and Sapphire Fire as Kuzan Fire's parents, that dynamic is great. The fact that they pull it off and the headmaster actually believes them is brilliant. I think it's just very over the top, but so funny, because Wang Fire, of course, comes back a couple of times, at least the beard and that kind of character. It's really, really funny. And the as I said, the ultimate goal of this is that Aang gets information out of learning from at the Fire Nation school, but he also is I suppose teaching the next generation of Fire Nation, who will be adults, the kids, the youth here, is teaching them this important lesson. I suppose before the war comes to an end, I suppose it's good that someone prior to that forced change of perspective, gave them the idea of like, you can have expression, you can do things on your own, you don't have to just agree with everything everyone says and tells you, like the idea of expression through dancing here. I like the way that the kids, his classmates, just show an interest in it. They find Aang really, really interesting because he, because he just expresses himself so much. The way he kind of talks to the teacher, the fact that like he doesn't just stay silent when he doesn't know the words to the oath and just starts kind of making it up and makes them all laugh. The music class, he starts kind of moving his feet all around the place when he's playing the Sungi horn. They are just interested in him, and especially like the fact that he comes into this very kind of school dynamic of like the bullies have the advantage, the popular kids have the advantage, and he should be on the bottom rung of the ladder because he's the new kid. But he's so different than everyone else, he ends up kind of being almost immediately a cool kid, and the girls seem to like him, and the guys are kind of impressed with him, and especially when he stands up to Hide, without really like being in any way forceful about it, just with his personality, he kind of ends up somewhat scaring kind of Hide off. And then of course the fight that's just Aang dodging Hide's attacks is brilliantly animated to show Aang just using air nomad dodging techniques. He takes him out without touching him at all. The only, I think, in any way touch that Aang puts on Hide is just kind of backing up against him with the whole, back-to-back scene, and then he kind of slightly bumps him backwards, but doesn't actually do any damage to him with that. So, really, really fun scene, and of course, all of this stuff gives him enough, I suppose, respect within the school dynamic to the fact that when he invites them to the dance party, they all come. Hide is the only one who doesn't initially come because he tells the teachers, of course, but everyone else, it seems like, from the class that he knows, comes because they're interested in what he has to say and what he's about. And I think that's just a very, very cool dynamic to have there, to see Aang just have such an influence in that, like, he's not even in his role as the Avatar here. He's just, as far as they're aware, just another student, but a different and interesting student, and the influence that he has. And ultimately I'd like to see a follow-up to this, to see if like this group, like the two main boys and like Anji, those three, or the whole class just in general, do they, as they grow up, become this really big change within the Fire Nation? Do they, obviously with Zuko in charge, they're obviously be allowed to make their own decisions as they grow up? Do they kind of go on to be this kind of really important generation of Fire Nation citizens in terms of really turning things around for the Fire Nation? I'd like to see somewhat of a follow-up to that, and I think if we ever go back to the Fire Nation in the comics and get to explore it a little bit, I'd like to see if like any of these characters, we meet Anji and here she is in this like position. She's a teacher now maybe, and is teaching them the truth and about what actually happened, and that there is a dark side to the Fire Nation, and so on. That sort of thing. I'd like to see that sort of a dynamic. That this episode had a little bit more impact than just helping them to express themselves, as Toph says to Aang at the end. Which I do like that little scene at the end. That like Toph wasn't too much of a focus in this episode, but just at the end she notes that like actually like I was doubting it at the start, but Aang, you actually really, I think, by the end, managed to help those kids with what you did, even though it seemed to us like this completely random thing of you going to school and throwing a dance party. Sokka, of course, was really brilliant throughout the entire episode. Anytime he puts on a character, I think Sokka is, brilliant in the episode, whether it be the detective or, his acting as his father here, Wang Fire. Really, really well done. And then Katara, of course, has that more comedic role, but then just herself at the party as well, as when you bring the kind of like school romance drama kind of aspect of the episode into play. We had a little bit of romance in the Zuko side, so we have some in the Aang side as well. In that I think Anji was maybe had a little bit of a crush on Aang, and you could see that a lot of the girls were very impressed with Aang with the dance moves, and they were blushing. So that was cool just to see that like Team Avatar kind of acknowledged that like Aang is kind of smooth when he really sets his mind to it, and is kind of impressing everyone. And to see like Sokka point out that like, oh, those two look really good together, and Katara be a little bit jealous of this, and when Aang goes over to her, she's kind of really nervous about like accepting the dance, but then he just goes, you know, like, take my hand, just with pure confidence, and she just kind of goes along with Aang, and she gets nervous when she's doing the dance, but he says, just look at me, just the two of us here. And it is this really nice, you know, Katang moment of just like, how can you watch this scene and not in any way see some sort of a connection between the two of them? Just the fact that everyone watches them and sees that this is, you know, something different than any of the dancing they've seen before, because it is a mix of kind of like bending, sparring training plus dancing. And obviously I think the real world influence is like, what's it, capoeira, the Brazilian form of dancing. So it's a really kind of nice scene for the two of them, to just kind of show a little bit of closeness, I suppose, without having it just be like a kiss, because the kisses have to be the kind of more symbolic things later on. But just here's a moment of just showing that like there's definitely something developing here, even if they haven't fully said it to each other just yet. So there was that, and of course everyone comes in. The party gets, you know, crashed by the adults, but even some of the guards that they bring in start dancing as well. And of course Team Avatar escape and leave the mess as it is there, with the idea that the kids end up helping them escape by all putting on the headbands to look like Aang, of course, because he was the only one with a headband. And that's what kind of leads to the escape, that, you know, they didn't want Kuzan to get in trouble. And I really like that as a just little thing at the end. As I said, ultimately, I would have liked a little bit of a follow-up at some point. I don't think it was necessarily a requirement within the series, but I'd love to see and come back just to see what these characters are doing, the impact that they're having on the Fire Nation. If them meeting Aang here had as big of an impact as I kind of feel it did, especially like come the end of the war, how many of them realized that, wait, Kuzan was the Avatar, we met the Avatar, he was our classmate for a couple of days. It would have been this really cool thing just to see a little bit of that. But yeah, just really strong side of the episode. You know, Aang gets a picture of Ozai, so he knows what Ozai looks like. Sokka has the idea of, you know, like a basic idea of the layout of the palace, because Aang teaches him about the secret river that they have. So they have an idea of like there is a kind of a direct way to just attack the main Fire Nation capital and get straight to the palace. So, you know, it does have an aspect of the plan in here as well. And then just I think is a really strong just Aang like personality episode. He's fun loving, and here's how his fun loving nature interacts with like the stuffy Fire Nation school dynamic. And I just thought it was really fun. And then the Zuko side of the episode was, I think, solid development in terms of like Combustion Man, here he is. I like the way that we end. The ending shot is on his forehead, establishing that there's something unique about this. The fact that the guy has like a metal hand, and you know, just that he's sent this seemingly legendary bounty hunter, and that like Zuko's heard about him, that he's one of the most well-known ones. That must be for a reason. Can't wait to find out why, type of thing. So good cliffhanger, and then just a fun episode overall. So that's my thoughts on the episode. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on the headband, as well as what I have to say. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.